Your century, whether it knows it or not, goes to bed in Indian. The pajamas it sleeps in, the bungalow it dreams of retiring to, the veranda it imagines drinking tea on, the shampoo in its shower, the very cot a camping trip unfolds. Every one of those words walked into English out of the households of India, because when the world's other empires finally reached the subcontinent, they discovered a civilization that had been perfecting the arts of domestic comfort, of cooling, bathing, dressing, scenting, and sleeping for 3,000 years, and they did what sensible people do in the presence of masters. They took notes, and the notes became vocabulary. Tonight, you are going to the source, one prosperous courtyard home in a North Indian town, in the age of the great Mughals, on a warm evening at the very end of the dry season, with the whole household waiting pleasantly for the rains. So settle into your bed. Let your shoulders sink. Let your hands rest wherever they are comfortable. There is nothing to remember tonight, and nothing to solve. If you drift off before the evening is done, that is exactly what this story is for. You wake up in the courtyard of an Indian haveli, in the gold of late afternoon, on the most comfortable piece of furniture this whole journey of centuries has laid you down on. The charpoy. It is a bed of 4 words, char, 4 pi feet, and of 4 parts, a light wooden frame on 4 turned legs, strung with a broad-woven web of cotton rope, and the weave is the genius. It gives beneath you, everywhere at once, firm and yielding together, a hammock with manners, cool because the air moves freely up through the webbing, which in this climate is half the science of sleep, and light enough to be carried anywhere by one person, which is the other half. For the charpoy migrates through the day like a sundial's shadow, into the shade at noon, onto the veranda for the siesta, out into the open courtyard at evening, up to the roof in the deep hot season, the bed following the comfort around the house, the way the house was designed to make comfort worth following. Your century sleeps on the word without knowing it. The Hindi for a bed frame of exactly this kind is cot, and English, meeting it, kept it, and every cot in every language of your world, every camp, cot and child's cot and cot by the summer lake. Is this rope bed still holding its first name, still holding you, at this moment, in the original? The afternoon rest is ending around the courtyard in the pleasantest possible way, by degrees. Somewhere above on the gallery, a hand fan has slowed to a stop against a knee. Doves are conversing in the neem tree that leans over the east wall. From the kitchen corner comes the first soft clatter of the evening meal beginning its long approach, and the light on the upper story has gone the color of ghee, and the stone under your trailing hand is releasing the day's heat in a slow, friendly wave, and the whole house, arranged in its galleries around this one open square of sky, is stretching and turning toward evening like a creature that has slept well, which it has, and so magnificently, strung on 4 feet and a woven web have you. Sit up on the charpoy and take the measure of the building around you, because the haveli is one of the great quiet machines of this whole journey. A house built not as a box to keep weather out, but as an instrument to play the climate, and the courtyard you woke in is its sounding board. Seen from the lane, the house gives almost nothing away. The haveli turns its back on the world, a high plain wall to the lane, one deep carved doorway, a few high windows screened in stone, all its beauty and all its life folded inward around this open court. The angan, the roofless room at the heart of everything, and the inward turn is not shyness. It is engineering, twice over. Once, for the household's privacy, the family's whole world, its women's courtyards and men's sitting rooms, its kitchens and shrines and sleeping galleries, arranged in tiers around a private square of sky that no neighbor overlooks, and once for the heat, because the courtyard is a chimney for coolness. And here is how the instrument plays. All day the sun beats on the outer walls, thick and blind, and hardly enters. The court, shaded by its own galleries through the worst hours, keeps a well of cooler air at the house's heart. And as evening comes and the masonry begins to breathe its stored heat upward, the warm air rises out of the courtyard like smoke up a flue, and cooler air is drawn down and through, and every room around the court, opening onto it through arcades and screens, is gently ventilated by the house's own respiration. No moving part anywhere, the building inhaling at dusk. All night, exactly as the mudbrick of one river and the windcatchers of another taught you this whole hot country science works: mass, shade, and patience conducting the air. And the screens through which the house breathes are its signature and its jewelry at once. The jali, panels of stone pierced into lattices fine as woven cloth, geometry cut until rock becomes lace, and they are working lace. A jali admits the breeze and breaks the glare, lets the woman at the gallery rail watch the whole courtyard while remaining a shadow, cools the air that squeezes through its 100 small openings, the way a narrowed river runs faster and throws, all day, across the floors and the beds and your own forearm at this moment, its slow-turning constellations of light, the house's one moving decoration, powered by the sun, telling the time in stars on the stone until the sun goes down and hands the job to the lamps. The one thing the Haveli does offer the lane is its door, and the door is a book, so read a page of it before the evening moves on. It is a great double leaf of seasoned wood, brass-studded, set deep in a carved stone frame that carries the family's whole public autobiography, vines and rosettes and parrots, and, over the lintel, the small niche for the threshold deity whose lamp the household lights at dusk with the tulsis, and cut into one great leaf, so that the whole gate need never be opened for a single person, is the little wicket door, waist high, that everyone actually uses, and its lintel is set deliberately low, so that whoever enters this house, prince or peddler, enters it bowing, humility engineered into the carpentry. The same trick the Espa's low door played on the winter, and this door plays, more elegantly, on pride. The threshold itself is a boundary this civilization takes with full seriousness, never to be stood upon, always stepped over, greeted by brides with a toppled measure of rice at their first entrance, decorated each dawn by the daughters-in-law with the rangali, the day's fresh geometry of rice flower patterns laid out by practiced fingertips on the swept stone. Ephemeral on purpose? Walked away by the day's traffic, feeding the ants, which is counted part of the offering, and renewed every single morning. The household's welcome redrawn daily in flower, so that this door, between its carved permanence above and its powdered impermanence below, states the Haveli's whole philosophy at the property line. What we built to last. What we give fresh daily. Bow as you come in. The household is assembling its evening around you, and the census, taken from a charpoy with your eyes half open, is 3 generations deep and runs on the oldest operating system in this journey, the joint family. The grandfather holds the deep chair on the shaded side, string of beads moving through his fingers at the pace of the doves, presiding over the courtyard the way the banyan presides over the village square, mostly by shade and permanence. The grandmother rules from the kitchen threshold, which is this house's true throne, directing the evening meal's approach with an eyebrow here and a half-word there, her authority so complete it has not needed raising in 20 years. The sons are returning from the shop in the cloth bazaar, their day's ledgers under their arms, and the daughters-in-law move through the galleries in a soft ringing of anklets, lamps beginning to travel with them, and the children, released from the heat's long truce, have resumed possession of the courtyard floor with a game of knucklebones whose rules change hourly and whose disputes are settled by the eldest girl with the gravity of a high court. Above the far gallery, the tulsi plant stands in its raised masonry pot like a small green flag. The holy basil every household of this faith keeps and tends, watered at dawn, circled with a lamp at dusk. The house's living shrine, medicine chest, and good omen in one fragrant bush. And the youngest daughter-in-law is at it now, with the first lamp of the evening, and the little flame going around the leaves is the day's hinge. The moment this household, like a million households from the mountains to the sea, folds afternoon into evening with one circling light. And through it all, the courtyard conducts. That is what you notice, drowsing at the center of it. Nobody crosses anyone. The kitchen's traffic, the children's game, the lamp rounds, the grandfather's stillness, all of it moves in the long-practiced orbits around the open square, the family arranged around its private sky the way the rooms are, and the Haveli reveals its deepest function, which was never merely shelter or even coolness. It is a machine for holding a large family together without friction, everyone in sight, everyone in reach, everyone with a gallery's worth of distance when distance is wanted. 3 generations sharing one address and one courtyard and one slowly appearing dinner, at ease, in the gold light, inside the architecture of togetherness. And now, before the evening sweetens completely, the passage this journey owes, and in this house it must be read with particular care, because the order that holds this beautiful courtyard together also holds, at its edges and beneath its floors, an arrangement your century rightly struggles to look at steadily. This household, this street, this whole civilization is ranked hereditarily by caste, and the ranking is not a loose custom, but the load-bearing frame of the social world. The family you are drowsing among stands high in it, merchants of an old and honored line, and the people who serve this house, who carry its water and wash its cloth and sweep its courtyard at dawn, belong to communities assigned to those labors by birth, as their parents were, as their children will be, and beneath even them stand communities held to be untouchable, whose very presence is hedged with rules, who take water from separate wells and live at the village's edge. And none of this is hidden or embarrassed here. It is the visible order of things, sanctified by long custom, enforced by everyone on everyone, and it will take centuries, reformers, saints, lawgivers, and struggles that are not finished in your own century, even to begin unbuilding it. You know the discipline of this hour by now, and it does not change for beauty. The courtyard's peace is real. The water carrier's skill, the sweeper's dawn thoroughness, the whole human excellence of the people this order confines is real, and realer than the order. And the confinement is real, and the softest evening in the loveliest Haveli in the province does not soften it. And this story, which has read the ledger honestly in Rome and the North, and the Valley of the Pyramids, and the Empire of the Tsars, reads it honestly here, and holds in the one steady hand you have practiced for 10 centuries, both the golden courtyard and the separate well. The evening will be no less gentle for having told the truth. It never has been yet. The evening meal is arriving now in earnest, and the kitchen corner of the courtyard has become the house's stage, so watch the performance from your rope-strung stall, because Indian cooking at household scale is one of the summit crafts of this entire journey. The hearth is the chulha, the low clay stove the grandmother's grandmother would recognize, and on it, the flat iron tawa is already speaking, because the bread of this house is made fresh. At the meal, by the meal, rounds of wheat dough rolled thin and slapped onto the hot iron, blistering, flipped at the exact murmur only the cook can hear, then held one moment over the open flame where each roti swells suddenly into a steaming globe, applause from the children being traditional at a well-puffed one, and collapsed soft onto the waiting cloth, buttered with a thumb smear of ghee, and repeated, the rhythm of roll, slap, turn, puff, running under the whole meal like a drummer, because bread here is not baked ahead in loaves. It arrives in a warm, continuous stream and stops only when the last eater surrenders. Around the bread, the pots. The dal, the eternal comfort of the subcontinent, lentils gone to golden velvet over the afternoon, finished at the last moment with the tarka, the little pan of ghee in which cumin seeds are made to crackle and bloom for 5 loud seconds before the whole sizzling spoonful is poured hissing over the pot, scent detonating across the courtyard, which is the signal, more than any word, that dinner is now. Rice, each grain standing apart. A dry dish of the season's vegetables bright with turmeric. Yogurt, cool and plain, the meal's peacemaker. Pickles and chutneys at the edges like punctuation. Lime pickle that could wake the grandfather's grandfather. Sweet mango chutney for the children. And the spice box open on the kitchen floor. The round brass tin with its 7 small bowls. Turmeric, cumin, coriander, chili, mustard seed. The household's palate and its pharmacy in one. For every spice in it is also a medicine in the grandmother's other system. Turmeric for wounds, ginger for the chest, and the kitchen and the clinic of this house have never once been separate rooms. Dinner is eaten in the courtyard, on mats and low stools. Thalis balanced, rotis arriving in their warm relays, the family eating with the right hand in the practiced grace your century's cutlery never taught it, and the meal runs long and easy into the blue hour, and ends the way meals here have ended for centuries. With pine, the folded green leaf packet of areca and lime and sweet spices that the grandmother assembles like tiny correspondence and distributes with judgments attached, and the courtyard chews and settles, and the first star comes out over the neem tree, exactly on time. The dinner you watched assembled had its overture this morning, and the grandmother made sure the visitor heard it, because the true engine of this kitchen is not the stove, it is the stone. Every dawn, before the chulha is even lit, the courtyard's working corner rings with the household's oldest percussion, the silbata, the flat grinding slab and its rolling stone on which the day's masala is made fresh, because in this kitchen, the spices are never used ground from a jar. The jar is where whole spices sleep, and each morning, the day's requirement, the ginger and garlic, the coriander seed, the dried chilies softened in water, is worked on the wet stone into a bright paste, the bata rolling and crushing under the daughter-in-law's practiced weight, the slab releasing its rising cloud of scent, that is the household's true first light, and the difference between this morning paste and any powder that is waited in a tin, the grandmother will tell you, is the difference between a sung raga and a hummed one, and the whole lane agrees. Every courtyard along it ringing with the same stone-on-stone dawn music, the neighborhood grinding itself awake in overlapping rhythms like the shadufs of the old river, and a bride's strong sure hand on the sile. The sayings here insist is worth more than her weight in ornaments, and the sill itself, a good dense slab from the famous quarries, is handed down mother-in-law to daughter-in-law, dressed and re-roughened by the traveling stone-knapper on his rounds, and holds in its shallow worn hollow 3 generations of breakfasts, which makes it, in this house's practical theology, very nearly as holy as the tulsi, and considerably more useful before noon. As the plates are cleared, the water carrier makes his last round of the evening, and follow him with your ears, because the water of this house is its own quiet science, and this is the season when the science matters most. The house drinks from the makka, the round-bellied jars of unglazed red clay standing in their shaded niche, and the unglazed is the whole invention. The clay is left porous on purpose, so that the jar sweats. A slow, constant seep of moisture through its walls that evaporates from the outer surface, and evaporation steals heat, always, from whatever it leaves. And so the water inside a maca is cooled by its own patient escape, degrees below the evening air, with no ice, no mechanism, no cost. The poor man's refrigeration your century's engineers still cite with admiration, and the first cup from a fresh maca on a hot evening, faintly mineral, faintly sweet with the taste of wet clay, cold in a way that seems frankly impossible, is one of the small perfect experiences this climate has engineered for itself. Egypt cooled its jars this way on its own river, and this house has never heard of Egypt's jars, and both of them are right, which is by now the oldest song in this journey's book. And the season's real water, the water everyone is waiting for, announces itself tonight only as a smell, and the smell is the finest in the country. Away south, somewhere over the horizon, the monsoon is assembling, weeks of ocean rain marching up the map on its ancient schedule. And this evening, for the first time, the breeze that crosses the courtyard wall carries the ghost of it, rain that has fallen on hot, dry earth somewhere 50 miles away, the deep, mineral, unmistakable scent of the first water on the first dust, the smell every soul in this country can identify blindfolded, and no one can adequately describe, and the whole courtyard lifts its head at once. The grandmother mid-pawn, the children mid-game, the doves themselves, and someone says the word for rain softly, the way you say a guest's name when you hear their step in the lane, and the perfumers of this land, who miss nothing, long ago learned to capture that exact scent, distilling the essence of rain-struck earth itself from baked clay into little vials they sell as midi attar, the perfume of the first rain, bottled weather, the fragrance of relief, so that in this civilization you can wear on your wrist in April the smell of the thing the whole country is waiting for, which may be the most poetic act of chemistry in this or any century. And between the stone and the stove stands the kitchen's third instrument, tall in its corner, and the sound it made this morning is the sound this whole civilization means by morning. The churn. The house buys no butter. The house makes it daily from its own curd, in the great clay vessel with the wooden churning staff. The staff spun back and forth by a rope wrapped around it and pulled hand over hand, the oldest rotary engine in this journey, and the churning is the grandmother's own first office of the day, or was, until her hands passed it on, and the rhythm of it, the slosh and knock, is the sound to which every child of this courtyard has woken since the walls went up. Out of the churn comes the day's white wealth in order. First, the butter itself, gathered in cool pale lumps, destined for the ghee pot, where it will be simmered gold and clarified into the cooking fat and lamp fuel and festival offering of the whole culture, and behind the butter, the churn's second gift. The buttermilk, chaste, thin, tart, and cooling, salted and cumin-dusted and drunk by the brass tumbler through the hot hours, the field worker's air conditioning, the guest's first refreshment, and its richer cousin lassie, curd whipped smooth with water and a little sugar, thick enough to earn its slow drinking. The glass of it you were handed on arrival this afternoon, being this house's standard eloquence, meaning welcome, meaning rest, meaning the heat is our problem now, not yours. Milk, curd, butter, ghee, buttermilk, the one white river run through 5 forms by a stone, a staff, and a rope, nothing wasted, everything employed. The household's dairy economy closed and humming like the courtyard's own hydrology, and the churn stands in its corner now in the dark, scoured and resting, with tomorrow's curd already setting in its covered pot beside it, on schedule, like everything else this house does before it needs to. With dinner settled, the grandfather proposes the evening's small expedition, the one the hot weeks make customary, a walk to the Bowery before full dark, and you go with the household party through the blue lanes, because the Bowery, the stepwell, is the one piece of this town's architecture that outranks even the Havli, and it must be seen to be believed. And even then, imagine a cathedral, and then imagine it upside down and buried. From the lane, it is nothing, a plain stone enclosure, but step through the gate, and the ground opens into a vast rectangular chasm descending story below story into the cool dark. Its walls not rough shaft, but architecture all the way down, flights of steps in great crisscrossing geometry. Hundreds of them, thousands in the grandest wells of this land, landings and pillared galleries and carved pavilions stacked rim to water. An inverted palace whose deepest floor is a green-black mirror of water far below, and whose entire purpose is the marriage of this country's two seasons. For in the rains, the well fills nearly to the brim, and the architecture drowns almost politely. And through the long dry months, the water sinks story by story, and the building emerges after it, the steps always reaching the surface wherever the surface has retreated to, a staircase that follows the water table down through the year like a hand kept always on a descending shoulder. And it is not merely a well. It is the town's cool cellar, its meeting hall, its refuge from the furnace afternoons, because the air at the lower galleries, shaded by the whole mass of the earth and cooled by the water's breath, runs degrees below the street in the worst weeks. And generations have descended here to sit out the heat, the women drawing water and lingering, the travelers resting in the wall niches built for exactly them, the pigeons holding the middle stories. The whole structure, a public act of architecture whose only functions are water, shade, and welcome, built by kings and merchants as works of merit, because in this land, for 1,000 years, the highest thing wealth could do was cool a stranger's water. Tonight, the party descends a few flights into the rising coolness, the children counting steps out loud and losing count on purpose, the water far below holding the first stars in its black glass. The stone underhand still faintly warm at the top flights and cave-cool 3 landings down, the whole inverted building breathing its mineral quiet up past you, and the grandfather sits on his customary landing and says what he says every visit, that men build towers to be seen and wells to be remembered, and lets the well make his argument, which it does, in cool air and starred water, better than any tower ever could. The house's water, before it ever reaches the Makkah's patient clay, arrives on a man's back, and his evening round was one of the day's fixed music. He is the bishti, the water carrier, one of the town's hereditary guild of them, and his instrument is the mashak, the whole goatskin, cured and seamed and slung, filled at the well or the river gat, and carried heavy on the hip and shoulder, its neck pinched in his fist for a spout, and he waters the town the way the doves patrol it. On rounds, the households of his beat holding their standing arrangements, so many skins a day at the kitchen door. The courtyard's evening sprinkling in those same dark practiced arcs, the municipal man lays on the lanes, and his trade is old and honored in its narrow way, sung in the town's stories, indispensable 6 months of the year, and conducted, like the sweeping and the washing, from within the boundaries, the evening's honest passage named, which you remember and hold as agreed, alongside the skill itself, and the skill is real. A full mashak weighs what a man weighs, and the bishti carries it up the gat steps and through the lanes 30 times a day with the rolling, conserving gait of a profession that has engineered its own biomechanics over 500 years and can direct its pinched spout with a fencer's accuracy, filling a matka to the brim from 3 feet without a dropped cupful, and the sound of his pour, the drumming rush into the empty clay going up the scale as the jar fills, is one of the household's dozen daily clocks, mid-morning and dusk, as regular as the temple bell, and pleasanter, the grandmother maintains, than most of what the temple bell interrupts. Back in the courtyard, full night now, the lamps have taken over the house, and the evening enters its sweetest stretch, the hour of music, and the music of this civilization comes with a property so perfectly suited to this story that it might have been designed for it. It keeps hours. The daughter-in-law who sings has taken her place on the mat with the tanpura, the long-necked drone whose 4 strings, plucked in slow rotation, lay down the shimmering carpet of sound. This whole tradition floats on, and what she will sing is a raga, and a raga is not a tune. It is a musical personality, a fixed constellation of notes and phrases and moods, out of which melody is grown fresh at every performance, and the tradition holds, and has held for centuries, that each raga belongs to its own time of day. There are ragas of the dawn, austere and slowly brightening, that the tradition insists should not be sung at dusk. Evening ragas of longing and homecoming, ragas of first dark, of midnight, of the small hours before light, an entire clock face of prescribed feeling, so that a trained listener hearing a raga begin knows what hour it is meant to be, the music and the day keeping each other, and your century's scholars may debate what the doctrine rests on, but no one who has heard an evening raga sung in an actual courtyard at actual dusk has ever needed the doctrine defended. She sings one now, of exactly this hour, the drone establishing its endless amber floor, her voice entering low and unhurried, circling the raga's home notes, leaning on the tender ones, the melody assembling itself, phrase by patient phrase. The way the evening assembled itself, no hurry anywhere in it. Ornaments turning slowly like the jolly stars, and the courtyard receives it the way courtyards have received it for 500 years. The children going still against knees, the grandmother's hand resting on the pawn box, the lamps leaning, and the raga does what the evening ragas were made to do, which is to lower the whole household gently down the last steps of the day, story below story, like the Bowery's stairs, following the light down to where the night's water waits, dark and cool and holding stars. Before the raga, the courtyard's after-dinner hour belonged to the board, and the board of this civilization is a cross of embroidered cloth, and the game is the ancestor of one your century's children still fight over on rainy afternoons. It is Chopar, and its humbler cousin, Pachisi, the cross and circle race that this land has played for at least 1,500 years. The cloth board unfolded on the courtyard stone in its 4 worn arms, the pieces of turned wood, the throws made not with dice, but with cowrie shells. 6 of them cast rattling from the cupped hand, the count read from how many land mouth up, and the racing rules your century would recognize at once, the pieces journeying out one arm, around the world of the board, and home up the center, captures sending the careless back to birth, the safe squares sheltering the pursued, and the grandmother, who plays the way she runs the kitchen, with terrifying economy, tonight administered to her eldest son a defeat so complete that the household has already begun assigning it a name. The stories of the great Mughal court, told all over this land, say the emperor himself loved the game so well, he had a courtyard of his palace paved as a giant board and played it with dancing girls as living pieces, moving at his call across the marble arms. And whether the tale is history or the kind of thing history deserves, the paved crosses are there in the red palaces to this day. And your century's children, racing their plastic counters up a printed cross in the game the English took home and renamed, are playing, though nobody has told them, at being emperors, on a board that is a map of coming safely home. As the raga settles into its slow orbits, take the household inventory your own century has been sleeping in all along, because the comfort around you is full of words you already own, and the evening is the right hour to hand them back. Begin with what everyone in this courtyard is wearing now that the day's formality is folded away. The loose drawstring trousers of rest, light cotton, tied at the waist, the single most sensible garment ever devised for warm weather ease, and their name in the Persian-flavored speech of this empire says only what they are: pay, leg, jama, garment, pajama, the leg clothes. When the foreign merchants down at the coast adopt them, first for lounging and then, the stroke of genius, for sleeping, they will carry the word home, and your entire century will go to bed every single night, dressed in 2 syllables of this courtyard's evening. The house itself travels the same road. The rest house of the countryside here, the low, deep verandaed single-story dwelling built in the local manner, is a bangla, a house in the Bengal style, and the foreigners who fall in love with the form will wear the word down to bungalow and export the idea to every suburb and seaside of your world, so that a bungalow in your century is a Bengal house that has forgotten its passport. The veranda it dreams of, this gallery running around the courtyard where the fan slowed against a knee this afternoon, carries a name the traders passed hand to hand so long ago that the dictionaries still argue over which port it boarded at. And beyond the town walls, the wild scrubland where the household does not walk at night is the jangle, the uncultivated, the tangled, and English took that too, and made it jungle, and filled it with its own imaginings. Even the cloth this family trades in the bazaar has been quietly naming itself into your wardrobe for a century already. The bright printed cottons of this land, chint, the sprinkled, the spotted, sail west as chintz, and drive the drapers of Europe to protective panic. The plain sturdy calico takes its name whole from the port city it ships from. The coarse blue work cloth of a dockside quarter down the coast will dress your century's every workshop as dungarees. And the bright square the grandfather ties loosely at his throat in the hot months is a bandna, a tied and dyed thing from the verb to tie, which your century wears at its own throat, on trails and in gardens, as the bandana still tied, still dyed, still faithfully named for the knot. A civilization's comforts, you have learned tonight, emigrate inside their own words, and this one clothed, housed, shaded, and put to bed half your vocabulary, and asked nothing for it. And the raga turns over into its next slow phrase, entirely unimpressed, having known all of this since before English existed. And one more of your century's nightly words was born not in this courtyard's wardrobe, but in its bathhouse. And the grandfather, whose evening routine is approaching its favorite station, is about to demonstrate. The barber's son comes at this hour twice a week for the champai, the head massage, and the grandfather assumes the low stool with the sigh of a man keeping the best appointment of his calendar. The craft is old, honored, and precise. Warm oil, coconut or mustard by season, worked into the scalp and the neck and the shoulders with kneading, pressing strokes, the fingers working the head the way the dough was worked at dinner. And the verb for it in this language is shampoo, to press, to knead. And when the sailors and merchants of a certain island nation encounter the practice at the coastal ports, in the bathhouses where the full treatment, steam, oil, and the long pressing massage undoes a sea voyage in an hour, they carry the word home, meaning exactly that. The massage, and only generations later, by the slow drift words, love. Does shampoo in English slide from the pressing of the head to the washing of the hair to the bottle on every shelf of your century, which now contains, etymologically speaking, not soap, but a massage. The ghost of the grandfather's twice-weekly hour, foaming faintly in a billion showers, still trying, in its diluted way, to press the day out of everyone's head. The grandfather under the working fingers has meanwhile achieved the expression of a man whose skull is being persuaded, joint by joint, to forgive the decade, and the household steps around the ritual with the respect due a sacrament, and the oil lamp beside the stool leans and steadies, and the raga, which knows this hour, supplies exactly the right amount of time, and the champy's oil is only one wing of the civilization's great palace of scent, and the summer house has a second, cooler wing, which the visitor smells before understanding it. All through the hot months, the doorways and windows of the Haveli's best rooms are hung with thick woven screens of a particular wiry root, kus, the vetiver grass of the riverlands, and the screens are kept wet, sprinkled through the day by the household's rounds. And the physics is the matka's physics, scaled to architecture. The hot wind arriving through the dripping mat and losing its heat to the evaporation, entering the room slowed, cooled, and, this being the point, no engineer would have thought to add, perfumed, because wet vetiver root releases one of the earth's great scents, deep, green, faintly smoky. The smell of a cool riverbank installed in a doorway, so that the Haveli summer rooms are air-conditioned by fragrance. The cooling and the perfuming, performed by the same wet screen in the same breath, comfort and beauty run on one system, which is the civilization's signature move performed here daily in grass. And in the grandmother's cabinet, in vials the size of a thumb, waits the same philosophy at its highest concentration. The attars, the true oil perfumes of this land, rose from the famous northern fields, jasmine, kus itself, and the midi you learned of at dusk, the distilled rain, each one aged in leather like a wine, dabbed at the wrist with a glass wand on occasions that merit it. And tonight, the coming monsoon being agreed by the whole rooftop to constitute an occasion, the grandmother has touched the midi attar to the children's wrists at bedtime, so that the smallest sleepers on the roof are wearing the smell of the rain that is coming to them, a few days early as a promise, which is the kind of thing this land does with chemistry, and the reason its perfumes alone in this whole journey can fairly be called a branch of hope. Beyond the Haveli's blind outer wall, the town is conducting its own warm evening, and from the roof gallery, where the household is beginning to carry its bedding, you can read it by ear and lamplight before you join the migration. The cloth bazaar 2 lanes over is closing in the leisurely local manner, shutters coming down on their own schedule, the last customers being detained by hospitality rather than salesmanship, and the food lane has taken over the evening's commerce, the sweet sellers' great flat pans glowing over their coals, the kebab man's smoke walking the lane like a crier, the water sprinkler making his last pass with his goatskin bag, laying the dust for the night in dark practiced arcs that release, in miniature, the same beloved wet earth smell the far monsoon sent ahead this evening. The town watering its own streets the way the daughter-in-law waters the Tulsi, part chore, part right. Lamps travel the lanes in 1s and 2s, going home. A wedding procession passes 3 streets off. All drums and horns and one overexcited trumpet arrives somewhere and dissolves into feast noise. The temple bell rings its unhurried evening count, and from the mosque quarter, the last call of the day rises and lays itself out over the rooftops. The town's 2 great faiths marking the same nightfall in their own voices, as they have side by side here for 3 centuries, and beneath both, constant as the doves, the town's own murmur, 500,000 small transactions of family and supper and gossip settling toward night. And through it, beginning now and lasting till dawn, moves the night's official voice, the chowkidar, the watchman, with his iron-shod staff ringing the ground every second stride, and his lantern swinging, and his call, given at the corners in a long-practiced cry, is the most economical lullaby in this whole journey of watchmen. 2 words, ja'akdaraho, stay awake, keep waking, cried through the sleeping lanes not as an order to the town, which is permitted, encouraged, expected to sleep, but as a report from the one man who may not. The announcement, over and over, corner by corner, that wakefulness is being maintained on the town's behalf, that its one required insomniac is on his feet and crying his own alertness into the dark, and the town here stay awake and understands. By the oldest of contracts, sleep well, and does. And the staff rings away up the lane, and the lantern light slides along the Haveli's blind wall and off it, and the doves do not even reopen their eyes. The household's nightly migrations is underway in earnest now, and it is the pleasantest domestic procession of this whole journey, the carrying up of the beds. In the hot months, this house, like the whole town, like the whole plain, sleeps on its roof. And the evening's last chore is the sweetest one. The charpoys hoisted up the stairs, one person to a bed, the light frames riding on heads and shoulders, the roof terrace receiving its familiar constellation of cots, arranged by long custom, the grandparents' pair by the parapet, where the breeze arrives first, the children's row, where the grandmother's arm can reach the nearest without her rising, water in its matka on the ledge, a lamp turned low by the stairhead, and the bedding shaken out over the ropes in the blue dark. The household resettling itself one story closer to the sky with the unhurried efficiency of a thing done 10,000 times. And by full dark, the whole town has done the same. Every roof around you, its own raft of sleepers, the entire city afloat, at rooftop level, on the cooling night. You have slept this way before, on another river, in an older empire, and the differences are the pleasures. Here the charpoy's webbing holds you off the warm masonry in a moving layer of air, the rope bed's whole argument, made at last in its native climate. Here the neem tree leans its bitter green freshness over the parapet, the tree this country calls the village pharmacy, its twigs the morning's toothbrushes, its leaves the grain chest's guardian, its shade held to be a degree cooler than any other trees. And whether the thermometer agrees or not, everyone sleeps nearer the neem by choice. And here, the roof has its own etiquette of neighborliness. The parapet's low enough that the town's rooftop population drowses within murmuring distance of itself. A last remark handed across the lane. A child's question answered from 2 roofs over. The whole neighborhood settling like the doves in one adjacent rustling under one sky. The stars have taken the whole ceiling now, thick and low, and the breeze arrives in its long-promised drafts off the cooling fields, and the charpoy receives you in its woven give, and somewhere below, the chowkidar's staff rings its patient iron heartbeat down the lane, and the day, examined from up here, appears to have been assembled all along with exactly this hour in mind. And the charpoy holding you is itself a craft with a calendar, and this one was restrung not a month ago. So you are lying on the fresh work, and it showed you its making this afternoon while you drowsed on it. The frame is the carpenter's share, 4 turned legs and 4 rails, pegged and wedged, no metal, in the manner of half the honest furniture of this journey. But the web is its own profession, the weaver arriving with his great hanks of cotton rope or woven tape, the old webbing cut away, and the new strung in a long geometric meditation, the warp laid rail to rail, the weft worked over and under in the broad herringbone that spreads a sleeper's weight evenly to the frame, the whole web tensioned as it grows by a system of final cords along one rail that can be tightened, season after season, as the cotton relaxes, because a charpoy is not made taut once, it is kept taut for 20 years, the way a drum is kept, and a household's beds are tuned each spring like its instruments. The weave must be firm enough to hold a grandfather, and giving enough to cradle a child, cool enough for June, and, with a quilt laid on, warm enough for January, and the masters of the craft, stringing a bed in an afternoon for a few coins, carry in their hands the accumulated sleep of 100 generations, which is a form of expertise this journey has learned to rank very high indeed. Your century will spend fortunes engineering mattresses toward exactly the balance of support. And give that is holding you at this moment, achieved here with rope, geometry, and a 1,500 years of customer feedback. at the price of a basket of mangoes, tuned annually, repairable anywhere, and carried up a staircase on one shoulder by a girl of 12. And lying under the low stars, let the year of this land wheel once over the charpoy, because this civilization long ago decided that 4 seasons were not nearly enough to describe what actually happens here, and its calendar is the richer for it. The year here turns in 6 seasons, not 4, each with its ancient name and its own poetry, and the count is not decoration, it is accuracy. There is the spring your century would recognize, mild and flowering, the season of the great color festival, when the whole social order dissolves for one morning in clouds of thrown crimson and yellow, and everyone emerges dyed, laughing, and briefly indistinguishable. There is the summer you are lying at the very end of, the furnace weeks, the season of the Bowery's deep galleries, and the matka's sweating patience, and the mango, of which more presently, the season, the whole calendar, leans through toward its successor. And then, and here is the season your century's calendar does not have, and this one built its whole year around, the rains. The monsoon is not weather here, it is a season with a throne. The Varsha, the arriving of which is the year's true new year. Whatever the almanac says, the first storm greeted on the rooftops by the whole town standing out in it. Children and grandmothers alike, in the crashing silver-gray downpour, laughing, drenched, the temperature falling like a blessing. The smell you caught tonight arriving at last in person, at full strength. Everywhere. After the rains, the calendar keeps counting where yours stops. The clear-washed autumn, season of the great festivals, the goddess's 9 nights, and then the festival of lamps itself, when every house in the land sets rows of little clay oil lamps along its parapets and thresholds and windowsills, the whole country outlined in small flames. The night of the year when this civilization states its entire theology of light against darkness in a million wicks, and the Havli's own parapet. The grandmother, will have you know, carries 40 lamps that night, and has since her mother-in-law's time. Then the early winter, mild and golden, the eating season, the wedding season, quilts appearing on the charpoy and the courtyard reclaiming the sun, it fled all summer. And the deep winter, brief and sharp, fog on the river at dawn, shawls and braziers, the one season the roof is surrendered, and the household sleeps below again, closing the circle. 6 rooms in the year's house instead of 4, and the household moves through them as it moves through the Havli itself, following the comfort, roof to courtyard to sunlit wall, the calendar and the architecture, 2 drawings of the same wisdom, and the wisdom is the one this whole journey keeps finding under different lamps. Do not fight the climate. Learn its floor plan and furnish accordingly. And the summer's one great consolation, the reason this furnace season is remembered all year with actual longing, had its place of honor at tonight's dinner, and deserves its own drowsy chapter. The mango. It is the fruit this civilization would send to represent it at any tribunal of paradise, cultivated here for 4,000 years, sung by its poets, planted by its emperors, and graded, named, and argued over with a connoisseurship your century reserves for wine. This district's pride is a honeyed blushing variety the grandfather maintains is superior to the famous one from the coast, a position he holds against his own son-in-law in an annual debate that has become itself a season. The names alone are a literature, the parrot beak, the saffron, the one named for a dancing girl, the one named for an emperor, hundreds of varieties across the land, each with its partisans, its district, its 2 or 3 perfect weeks, and the mango season as a whole, May into July, is a national event conducted in crates and gifts, baskets traveling between relatives as diplomacy, friendships, and betrothals ripening or souring on the quality of a scent box. Tonight's arrived after dinner, cool from the well rope, where the basket hung all afternoon, and were eaten in the courtyard in the only correct manner, which is with total commitment. The fruit kneaded soft in its own skin, by the practiced, the top bitten, and the whole thing drunk like a vessel of itself. The children painted to the eyebrows in gold. The grandfather closing his eyes at the first taste with the expression the raga would later take up and elaborate, and the verdict pronounced as it is pronounced nightly in season, that this year's crop, whatever its critics at the coast may say, approaches, without quite profaning, the mangoes of everyone's childhood, which remain, by the unanimous ruling of every generation in this courtyard, and every courtyard on this plain, the finest that ever were or will be. The night's small theater carries on around the rooftop rafts of sleepers, and its principal players deserve their curtain calls before you go under. The peacocks first, the town's most beautiful and least discreet residents, roosting now in the big tamarind by the temple tank, from which, at intervals no science has ever predicted, one of them releases into the night the cry that is somehow both magnificent and absurd, a wild ringing mee-aw that carries half a mile and answers itself off the tank water, and the household stirs no more at it than at the doves, because the peacock's cry is this town's cricket behind the stove, the sound of everything being normal, and the grandmother holds, with the meteorological establishment of every rooftop on this plain, that when the peacocks dance and cry by day, the rain is near, and the peacocks have been crying all week, and the grandmother rests her case. The coal will have the dawn shift, the glossy black cuckoo of the mango groves, whose rising, repeating, ever more insistent whistle is the alarm clock of the entire subcontinent's hot season, and the beloved torment of its poets, who have been telling it for 2,000 years to either bring the beloved or be quiet. The fruit bats are aloft now, big soft-winged shadows crossing the stars between the fig trees, silent as thoughts. A house gecko takes up its post by the stairhead lamp, upside down, patient as a hieroglyph, and chirps its small dry chirp, which the household counts as lucky. Geckos being on the payroll everywhere, lamps draw moths. And down in the courtyard, the night's most industrious singer, the tandoor cricket in the kitchen wall, files the same silver note his northern cousin files behind a Russian stove at this very hour of history, 3,000 miles away. Two singers who will never learn of each other, keeping the same appointment in two languages of wall, both, at this moment, on duty, 2 households down. The courtyard's other residents have kept their own evening offices around the households, and the smallest census closes the ledger. The house cow, tethered in her corner byre by the water stand, milked at dusk into the ringing brass pail, is less livestock than resident grandmother of another species, garlanded on her festival day, fed the first roti off the tawa by standing custom, the one household member whose comfort the actual grandmother inquires after before her own, and her slow jaw and heavy sighs have underwritten the whole evening from her corner, like a bass drone under the raga. The sparrows have long since filed into the jolly screens, whose 100 small openings are, among their other engineering, the town's great apartment house for sparrows, every Haveli's lattice chirping itself to sleep at dusk and awake at dawn. The squirrels, the little striped ones that own every courtyard tree of this land by immemorial right, have retired up the Neem, and the doves have said the last of what doves say. And under the stair, in a basket, she selected herself, and the household ratified after the fact. The cat, who adopted this family 2 monsoons ago, on terms that have never been written down and never needed to be, has taken up the night position from which, in her own accounting, she guards the grain room, and in everyone else's, she sleeps, and both accountings, in the manner of the very best arrangements in this journey, are correct. And once, deep in the night, the roof itself wakes you, the pleasantest way this journey knows, by improving. A wind has come up out of the south, the real herald at last, cooler and damp-edged, moving over the rooftop rafts of sleepers like a hand smoothing a sheet. And you surface just enough to feel the town feel it. A soft rustle of resettling running roof to roof, someone murmuring the word for rain again, half asleep. The neem turning its 1,000 leaves over with a sound like distant surf, and far to the south, so far it is felt more than heard. The first thunder of the season clearing its throat below the horizon. The charpoy's webbing holds you in its woven gyve. The matka sweats its patient degrees on the ledge. The chowkadar's cry comes up from the lanes. Stay awake, meaning sleep well. Sleep well, and the whole plain, 500,000 rooftops of it, turns over once toward the coming rains and settles deeper, and you settle with it, down through the smell of far wet earth, into the season's last dry sleep, which is the sweetest one. The way the last mile is the sweetest walking, and somewhere below, the gecko chirps once by the stair lamp, confirming the house's accounts, and the webbing takes your turning weight without a sound, tuned as promised, like a drum with nothing to announce. And before sleep takes the roof entirely, walk the golden evening once more, gallery by gallery, touching each thing as you pass it, and letting it go. The charpoys woven give beneath you, the bed that follows the comfort around the house, and the cat that became every cot your century ever unfolded. Let it go, the heavily breathing through its courtyard, the warm air rising out like smoke up a flue, the house inhaling at dusk, with no moving part anywhere. Let it go. The jolly screens, stone-cut until it became lace, working lace, throwing their slow constellations across the floors until the sun handed the job to the lamps. Let them go. The great door that makes everyone bow as they enter, and the welcome redrawn daily in rice flour at the threshold, built to last above, given fresh below. Let it go. The 3 generations in their practiced orbits, the Tulsi circled with its evening flame, and the architecture of togetherness. Everyone in sight, everyone in reach. Let them go. The ledger read without flinching, the golden courtyard and the separate well held in the same steady hand, and the truth that has never yet made an evening less gentle. Let it go. The silbata ringing the lane awake in overlapping rhythms, the morning's masala bright on the wet stone, and 3 generations of breakfasts worn into one shallow hollow. Let it go. The churn slosh and knock, the one white river run through 5 forms, and the lassi that means the heat is our problem now, not yours. Let it go. The rhodas arriving in their warm relays, the tarka detonating its 5 loud seconds, the spice box that is also the pharmacy, and the paean distributed with judgments attached. Let them go. The matka sweating itself cool, refrigeration by patient escape, and the first far smell of rain on dry earth, the perfume this civilization loved so much it learned to bottle the weather. Let it go. The bishtis pour drumming up the scale as the jar fills, the goatskin spout with a fencer's accuracy, and a profession that engineered its own walk over 500 years. Let him go. The Bowery descending story below story, the cathedral upside down, the staircase that keeps its hand on the water's shoulder all year, and towers built to be seen, wells built to be remembered. Let it go. The raga that keeps hours, the drone laying its amber floor, the evening music lowering the household down the last steps of the day. Let it go. The cowries rattling from the cupped hand, the grandmother's defeat already being assigned a name, and the emperor's marble courtyard where the pieces danced home. Let them go. The wet vetiver screens cooling the wind by perfuming it, comfort and beauty run on one system, and the smallest sleepers wearing the coming rain on their wrists, a few days early, as a promise. Let them go. The pajama and the bangla, the jangal and the chint, the bandana still tied and dyed. Half your century's wardrobe emigrating inside its own words and asking nothing for it. Let them go. The shampoo of the barber's son, the grandfather's skull persuaded to forgive the decade, and the massage still foaming faintly, diluted in a billion showers. Let it go. The water sprinkler laying the dust in dark arcs, the two faiths marking one nightfall in their own voices, and the chowkidar crying stay awake, corner by corner, so that the whole town may sleep. Let him cry it, and let it go. The web strung over and under in its broad herringbone, the bed tuned each spring like a drum, and 100 generations of accumulated sleep in the weaver's hands, at the price of a basket of mangoes. Let it go. The beds riding up the stairs on heads and shoulders, the town afloat at rooftop level, and the neem leaning its bitter green pharmacy over the parapet. Let them go. The 6-roomed year, the season your calendar does not have, the first storm greeted by the whole town standing out in it, and the parapet that carries 40 lamps on the night of lights, and has since the mother-in-law's time. Let it turn, and let it go. The mangoes cooled on the well rope, drunk like vessels of themselves, and the finest crop that ever was or will be, which is always, by unanimous ruling, the one from everyone's childhood. Let it go. The peacock's magnificent absurd cry, the gecko on the payroll by the stairhead lamp, and the tan-door cricket keeping the same appointment as his stove-wall cousin 3,000 miles north. Two singers who will never meet, both on duty. Let them go. The cow fed the first roti by standing custom, the sparrows filed into their lattice apartments, and the cat whose 2 accountings are both correct. Let them go. And the south wind crossing the rooftop rafts, like a hand smoothing a sheet, the neem turning its 1,000 leaves, the first thunder clearing its throat below the horizon, and the whole plain settling deeper toward the rains. Let it all go. It is all still there, and all still ripening. That is this land's own version of the promise. The monsoon is on the map, marching its ancient schedule. The lamps are trimmed, the matka is sweating, the watchman is crying his 2 faithful words down the lanes, and the year is leaning, with the whole weight of its 6 seasons, toward the silver-gray morning, when the rains break, and the town stands out in them laughing, and every dry week between now and then is already forgiven. So your hands can let go of the day, your shoulders can let go of the day, and your thoughts can carry their own small charpoys up the stairs now, and set them down in their customary corner of the roof, under the neem, within reach of the grandmother's arm, and stretch out in the woven give, under the low stars, in the smell of coming rain. One last thing, and this land should say it through its watchman, because no century of this journey ever put the contract more plainly. All night, through the lanes below, one man will cry stay awake, and an entire town will hear it and sleep better. And there is the whole arrangement you have been sleeping inside for 10 centuries, said out loud at last, in 2 words, at every corner. Someone stays awake and says so, and the saying is the lullaby, the sacrist's bell, the sweeping beam, the rattle, the clappers, the navigator's open eyes, and now a cry that means its own opposite, wakefulness announced so that sleep may be assumed. The town's one required insomniac reporting for duty, so that 500,000 people on their rooftop rafts owe the night nothing at all. The lamp is low by the stairhead. The matka is cold on the ledge. The wind is coming up from the south with the rains folded inside it a few days out on schedule. And the cry is moving through the lanes, corner by corner, fainter and returning. Stay awake, meaning, and everyone on every roof knows it means sleep, sleep. It is all being watched, none of it by you. And in a few days, on a night very like this one, the cry will be briefly drowned out, because the horizon's thunder will have arrived overhead at last, and the town will wake at the first crash. Not in alarm, but in celebration, and stand out on its million rooftops in the crashing silver dark, drenched and laughing. The year's greatest weather received like a returning ship, and then everyone will drag the charpoys in under the galleries and sleep the season's first cool sleep to the sound of water on stone. And the chowkidar, soaked to his lantern, will cry his 2 words into the downpour anyway on principle, and be right anyway, because some contracts hold in all weathers. Sleep now in the woven give under the coming rain. Good night.